When markets shift, your IP shouldn't sit still. Michele Baillie explains dynamic intellectual property, how to repurpose your tech, broker collaborations, and make value visible. Leadership today isn't just about scaling. It's about navigating constant uncertainty, market disruptions, and high-pressure decisions. If you're dealing with chaos, bottlenecks, and relentless pressure, welcome to the Business Emergency Room. Hey, thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you're here. I have a very cool guest today who will make a subject that most of us assume to be dry very exciting, I think. I know, actually. Today, I'm talking to Michele Baillie. Michele has spent over 3 decades working in the IP, intellectual property space. She is by origin an engineer. Maybe that's why I have such high hopes, right, as an engineer. But then has operated after that largely in the legal arena with lots and lots of accolades to her name. So I'm really glad you're here, Michele. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
So I already hinted at it that if you talk about, so what do you know, right? What people know about IP is there is definitely some who get excited about it, right? Who are in the invention and innovation space, but to many it sounds like quite a dry subject. But actually, there are things you can do with IP or around IP when your business is in turmoil, right? So when you are in an organization or your business is no longer operating as it should and you need to make some major pivots, you are telling me that IP could actually create some opportunities in that space. Can you talk some more about that?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. So before I jump into it, I'm often asked to just sort of give a really quick primer on what we mean when we say intellectual property or IP. So when we say IP, we're really talking about 4 different things. We're talking about patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. And every company has some combination of those 4 things, or maybe not all 4, but maybe a few. And patents cover functionality of an invention. Trademarks cover your branding. Copyright covers your expressions, like your marketing material and your website, and your computer code is copyrighted. And trade secrets, of course, is know-how that you want to keep secret, like a formula, a chemical formula, and so forth. So that's what we mean by IP. Now, when a company is in crisis or turmoil, or maybe even not, if you're just trying to figure out a direction to go and you're wondering how your IP can help you, there are 3 main things that you can think about. So an IP can help you to repurpose your technology. It can help you to establish collaborations and partnerships with other parties. It can also help you rebrand. And so your IP can support the rebranding. And I love to go to each of those in however way you want to.
Yeah, well, I would love to hear more. Can we do some examples with each of those?
Sure, I can give you some quick examples. So in repurposing, like for example, a company might have some existing technology and you're wondering what else can you do with it? Right. So an example is Fujifilm. Fujifilm was a company that had a lot of IP in film chemistry. Well, when digital photography came around, that kind of went away for them. So they figured, okay, now we have all this great IP. What can we do with it? They repurposed it into cosmetics and medical imaging. So that's how they took their existing technology, used it in a different way, and repurposed it for a different business. Right. Another great example is 3M. They had a lot of IP around commercial adhesives. And they repurpose it for consumer products. I mean, we all use Post-its, right? We all know about that.
Yeah, the sticky notes.
That's a wonderful example of using your existing IP and repurposing it. Right. Another way IP can help you is with collaboration, especially with partnerships. Pfizer during COVID had used their IP partnership with another company, BioNTech, who had the mRNA technology, and together they were able to create the vaccine and be able to scale it very rapidly. So there was two companies with their own IP, and they combined it in a partnership. Rolls-Royce had their IP, but instead of just selling engines, they collaborated with data companies where they're able to use their IP, and they became more of a service company as well as a manufacturing company. Right? For rebranding, my favorite example is Lego. Lego, as we all know, is a toy company. But they figured out a way to actually take their core patents and trademarks and license them. So now they have Lego Star Wars, they have Lego movies, they have, all sorts of Lego stuff, even Harry Potter Lego. Right? So that's an example of how you can reinvent your market identity using your IP to rebrand.
Yeah, great examples, and definitely some that I'd never heard of. So looking forward to showing off in the next pub quiz when I know more random answers, right? Oh, I love some of those examples that you don't think of, right? The Fujifilm one to me is yeah, a very intriguing one. The we At least in my mind, when you talk about legal protection of things you have, right, in this case, that sounds like something rigid, like something time consuming, like something um, that you're perpetually too late. But
Mhm.
you're suggesting that new collaborations and new partnerships can actually, yeah, very well be facilitated from this. And yeah, we all know that there's value associated with this. Um, if you want to use these things as strategic tools, do you really need a very different approach, or do you need a different type of collaboration with people like you than if it's more a part of your business that's running as business as usual? Does that create a different setup? How do people like you help in these places, in these spaces?
That's a great question. And because IP can be tough in a way, in that because the examples I just gave makes the assumption that their IP portfolio is already built out. Right? And it does take time to do that. So waiting until you need it or want it, you are behind the ball. So it is important to think about it as a business person, think about it, as part of your business processes. Um, and it's comes down, and it can be a tough decision to make in the moment for business leaders, because the return on that investment of building that IP may not be concrete at the time. Um, so it is a bit tricky sometimes, and that's where I can help them think of through, like, how can this help us? And I had talked, and it's a very common question I ask my clients: how are you planning to use this IP? What are you looking to do? What are the kind of markets you want? What are the kind of competitors you want? What kind of partners do you want? Because that helps me position their IP for them. Based on what their plans are. Because the IP doesn't happen in a vacuum. There is a context, and understanding the context is very important. So it's
So can I ask
sure.
an adjacent question to that? Because if we talk about exit planning or mergers or sales, right? The challenge we often run into is that what people perceive has value in their business doesn't have value to a new strategic partner or an acquiring party, because a lot of the intangible stuff is not quantified, or the quantification of that value hasn't happened in a way that it's transferable, right? Or understood by the other side. So, what are some of the things that you then, in that context, talk about also with your clients that they may want to do that might not have inherent value to them, but might make the value of their IP more understandable, or of a higher perceived value to others? What are
Mhm.
things you would consider doing for others, but maybe not so much for yourself in that space?
Well, I think the number one thing is you always want to protect your core technology, whatever that is, right? That's always value number one. Is how does this IP protect your ability to practice your business,
Yeah.
right?
The fundamental, the core of who you are and how you
Core of
operate.
who
Yeah.
you are. Because even partners, that's what they're going to be interested in, is who are you, right? The second question, the second tier question, is, well, if we want to establish partnerships, like what will our partners be looking for? What it is it that my company can provide, that there's a need out there in the market that we provide, that not necessarily the partner can't provide, but that it might be easier for them to partner with you than for them to develop it themselves, which happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I just could make better business sense to work with you since you already have it, you've already developed it, and we haven't. So let's just work together. Uh, and most of the time, I find that business leaders, they understand what it is. They have looked at the market already, and they haven't. They need to go and do that first before they come talk to me, because again, IP has to happen in a context. Um, and they can figure out what the partners are going to want from them, right? And then we can build that into the technology. And a lot of times it's an extension of their core technology. It's not necessarily something completely different. It's something that they already have the know-how, and they have a really good idea how they would build it. They may not have actually built it yet. Maybe they're waiting for a partnership before they actually put in the effort to actually build it out. But they have the know-how. I can help them protect that know-how. If they have an idea how they're actually going to implement it and have a comfort level, it's going to work the way they think it's going to work, I can actually help them patent that, even if they haven't prototyped it. Right? So
Wow.
that's a really good time to think about doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's really a good I call it always the quantification of the opportunity, right? Putting
Yes.
some numbers to it and
Right.
saying, okay, we haven't built it out, but this is ours, and we already have this piece. So we have the first step in that puzzle.
Mhm.
And if we would do this together, we could then do the next step jointly. And what I'm also hearing you say is very much then looking at what you have through the lens of your partner. How does this fit in their business, and would they pull what you have into their business and try to run it, and hence would it be run in a different context and have a different value because of that, or would you run it in your operating space for them, um, and what would then might be their concerns, or what is it they might need to understand therein. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So if um, when we when we talk about there's definitely the IP that businesses start around, right?
Mhm.
Particularly those that grow out of startups, there is a core typically there, but over time there's also more that grows or gets developed as part of the business, or extensions, as you talked about. Um, and in my experience, there is sometimes underestimation of what that's worth, or there is overestimation and people being very excited and wanting to submit everything and all sorts, and then kind of being disgruntled that the lawyer says it's not really worth anything. um, so if we talk about some of the stuff that's not core to your business, right, that's not what made Fuji Films, but maybe specific terminology, or branding, or other things that they do, and that has been developed over time and has become an asset. What are some of the questions to ask yourself to consider whether you should add other stuff to your IP portfolio as your business develops? What might be worth something and worth protecting? How do you think about that as a leader?
Well, I think you have to think of the IP in stages, because there is a way to kind of put a stakeholder down, um, and sort of at least get you started. And then there are decision points later on where you can then decide, okay, I know now that this is worth something. Like, so I'm going to put more money into that. Or, I was excited, but nobody else seems to be. So I'm going to let that one go. Um, and your attorney can take you kind of through the process and help you figure out how long do you have before you get to that next decision point. Right? And then hopefully you'll get more clarity about how much value that is. And then you can make a more informed decision at that time. So there are ways that we can leverage procedure, leverage, just the natural timeline of how long some of these things take, especially with patents. Patents take a long time to take. And there are several decision points along the way. And when we get there, I always still ask the question to the client, is this still important to you? This is how much it looks like it might take to get what you want. Is it worth it to you? And then it becomes a business decision. And then my job is to make sure that they have the information they need in order to make an informed decision. And I think it's important for business leaders to understand that if it turns out something is not of value, do let it go. Sometimes if you put in X amount of money and you invest a certain amount of time into it, it's hard to let go. We're all like that. That's human nature, right?
Yeah, investment bias, right?
Right,
Money
absolutely.
already spent seems to always be worth more.
Yes. And that can be hard sometimes to just admit, this is not worth doing for my business anymore, and you have to let it go. So that's an important decision point.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that it's kind of something that probably needs periodic review at a portfolio or actually your whole company level basis, that it's worth to have that conversation at periodic intervals and say, what is it what assets do we have in that space, to what level are they protected already, and do they still have the same context, and is it worth taking a next step on any of them to keep it, or the deadline has come up, and do we want to retain it or let it go?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So in reality, I also see a lot of IP losing its advantage because it's a time-based thing. So it's a first time or a trying to slow down the followers, but at some point things are no longer defendable. Is that a perception that that's a big chunk of what's out there, or is it true that in life a lot of what gets protected ultimately in time loses its value because it's harder to defend that you're the only one who can do this or do this way, and people find other alternatives, parallels?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is true that IP. I wouldn't say it gets stale. I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say that the industry catches up with you. If you're lucky enough to be a early stage innovator, and you're successful, and it really is something that the market wants, people will catch up to you, and then you're no longer the only one. Right? And that's why it's important to keep innovating, and it's important to keep thinking about IP and protecting your innovations. It's unusual for me to see a company get their first core IP, and then that's all they have to do, and that's it. It's unusual. It's much more common that once they make their core technology successful, they have to move on to the next thing. They have to stay relevant. And the IP has to follow that. The IP has to also stay relevant. So sometimes when the technology ages, you actually let that go so you can focus on the next thing so that you can support the business to stay relevant. So that's
Okay.
it. I think that
should be. I love that as a way to look at it, right? That your IP has to innovate with your product or follow the evolution of your products, and hence, previous iterations might become obsolete in that process, right? The other prejudice, of course, I think to many of us is around the money and the time involved, right? If you're a company that is running on smaller margins and still building and scaling, right? Every penny counts at times. What's the case that you make for to say to people, no matter how small your business is, if you have some proprietary stuff going on, you need to talk to somebody like me. What is the argument from your side to negate that prejudice that it might be too much money to make it worth it?
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of reasons to think about building a patent portfolio, or any IP portfolio, even when you're early stage. And I work with a lot of early stage startups, and I understand the budget pressure. First, I think investors look for that. That's one reason why you want to do it. So one of the common questions they ask is, during your pitch, have you filed any patents? And you want to be able to say yes. Even if you're not sure how successful your patents are, I think you need to really think about filing a patent application, at least for your core technology, because it shows that you understand that IP is important, and that you need to do something from the beginning. So she shows a certain sophistication and understanding of that. Secondly, when it comes to investors, they want to know that if they do invest in you, they want to know that your technology is protected. They don't want competitors to just be able to copy you, and then there goes their investment. Okay? It's not the whole of protecting investments, but it's one thing in the toolbox where they feel like their investment would be protected. Another reason is that it can, just like I was talking about the collaboration piece, it can encourage collaboration. Different companies, different IP. It's expensive to fight each other. That's not what you went into business for. You'd rather collaborate. And I think most businesses are like that. And that's a way for companies to be able to collaborate. And yet at the same time, understand this is my IP, well, this is your IP, and this is how we're going to work together. So it can make collaboration easier if you do it. So those are kind of the two main reasons that I would say to do it.
Yeah, and for me, it's a sign of health, right? It's one of these symptoms where I'm like, if you spend some time and effort in this space, it means that you actually think about the value of your business, or what is of value in your business, what generates the value or what carries it, and that you spend some time on quantifying this. And people always say, well, if I'm not interested in selling the business, why would I care?
Mm-hmm.
But it basically is just like with humans. It means that you have above average self insight, and that typically means that you play better in this world, right? Humans who have better self insight typically do better in social contexts, and it's the same with businesses that have better self insight and what makes them tick,
Mm-hmm.
operate better, right? So that's why I say, to me, it's one of these things that's a health related, a business health related issue for sure, which is
Mm-hmm.
why I'm so glad you came to talk about it today on the podcast. Michele, if people after listening to this episode are like, hey, I actually need to talk to somebody who knows about these things, or I want to know more, they want to know more about you specifically, and your practice, etc., where do they go? What do they do?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for me and reach out, send me a message if you want to connect with me. My firm is Cesari and McKenna. We're headquartered in Boston. Our website is c-m.com. You can find me on there. But the best way is to just send me a message on LinkedIn and reach out, or send me an email, and I will respond.
Yeah, and for those of you who are driving, maybe it's Michele with one L, and then the last name is Baillie, but it's spelled Baillie. And wherever you're listening to this podcast, the name will also be on the show notes, so you can look it up later, and find her through those channels. We'll make sure that the LinkedIn link is also in there. Michele, before we wrap this up, as you have the stage, we also have a fair amount of listeners who are advisors to businesses and to startups, who are in boards, who are investors, or who are in the C-suite, but might not actually have directly that much to do with this. What would you like our audience to if there's one thing they should remember about IP, what is it that you really want to have them take home from this episode?
I would say IP is, just think of it as a tool in your business toolbox. It is something that you should look at and understand how you want to use it or not use it. And you just think of it just like anything else in your business toolbox. So educate yourself. If you're not familiar with it, talk to someone who can educate you so that you can make a business decision surrounding it. So it's worth a conversation. I love talking about it. As you know, since I do this for business, I'd be happy to talk to anyone who wants to just have an initial conversation and understand what it's about and how it can or may not fit into your business. So it's worth the effort and the time investment to just talk with a professional and understand what it can or can't do for you.
Thank you. Very clear. And, based on today's episodes, it's very clear that IP lawyers are amazing and awesome and easy to talk to and can explain things very clear and well. Assuming you speak on behalf of all of those, or maybe we just had the best one here on the show today. But thank you so much. I'm glad you came to talk about this important subject. I hope everybody took away some fun stuff based on your examples and also some good thoughts to look at this maybe differently. Thank you for tuning in today. And thank you for joining me, Michele. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, that's goodbye for now. Hope to have you back on the next episode. Bye. That's it for this episode of the Business Emergency Room. If you are currently dealing with chaos or disruption in your business, please reach out. You can email, text, or call, and I will find a way to connect with you within 24 hours. I've helped others steer out of the storm, and I know I can help you too. Talk soon. Please like, subscribe, and share.